podcast, we focus on the empty offense and a coach's journey along the way that has seen a lot of twists and turns, and I've been able to watch that along the way. A guy I've gotten to know really well here in Ohio, the head football coach at Medina High School, Laird. Larry, it's great to have you here on the podcast finally.
Hey, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Well, Larry, you guys had an incredible season this year, and you know, the way that you operate primarily from an empty offense is something that goes back to early in your career, and Kenton High School and Mike Mock, and you know, everything that he was doing there is something you've come back to over time. But there was definitely a time along the way you were running a black and blue offense as the offensive coordinator here in Avon Lake, Ohio. But before we get into all of that, let's talk a little bit about that journey and coaching. And for you, Larry, where did this all get its start? What really made you want to become a football coach?
The biggest thing is probably, you know, you look back when you're a kid and the people that have the biggest influences on you. And for me, definitely was my high school football coach. And, you know, I think about that even as a coach today. I always try to think about, am I doing the right thing for the kid? Am I doing everything that I can do to be a positive role model? My high school football coach, very positive role model for me, and you know, set some ideas in my head as a kid as far as who did I want to be and what kind of person did I want to be, and I think that really is the reason I got into coaching.
It's been 31 years now, but as you go back through those 31 years and think about some of those key lessons for you along the way, and you've worked with some really good coaches too, but what are some of the things that stick out for you as far as those key lessons that really became part of who you are as a coach?
Well, the biggest thing, you know, and I have been fortunate. I have worked for two Hall of Famers that are two of the best coaches that I've known, but also two of the best people that I've known. And for me, the lessons that and it was very common for me to hear it from both of them, is be who you are. Don't try to fool anybody. You're not going to fool anybody. Be who you are and be the best possible person that you can be, and be the best possible role model. So I've been very fortunate in my career to have worked for some great coaches, Coach Mock at Kenton and Coach DeLugas at Avon Lake. And they taught me those lessons as a younger coach. Just be who you are.
For Coach Mock, you know, thinking back, and that's more towards the beginning of your career, but he had been doing it for a while and winning all kinds of football games. I know other people tried to replicate it, but maybe not with as much success. And today it's not necessarily out of the norm to see a lot of empty offense, but you know, Mike Mock's offense in Ohio, which in October and November, especially before the days of field turf can get pretty dicey, had a lot of success with that offense. And I know it's something that you learned in jumping ahead, you know, to where you are now. You're utilizing a lot of that, but you know, playing in that kind of offense, and you know, I don't know exactly what you guys had to deal with, especially, you know, maybe going to that style of offense early on. But what were some of the things you learned from Coach Mock and being able to, I guess, think outside the box and to be able to do something like that?
Well, I was fortunate when I got to Kenton High School. We had his older son, Ben Mock, who ended up being, you know, Mr. Football. And then Matty Mock, who was later on Mr. Football, was one of our little managers running around. So, but I was very fortunate when I got there in 2000. We were still a 2x2 and a 3x1 team. We were not completely empty. We didn't go completely empty until middle of the season, that my first year there. And I can still remember the young man's name that forced us to do it, because he was our running back and he kept on getting in the way. And I'm not going to say his name, but I remember us having a coaches meeting after one of the games, and Mike looking at us, the offensive guys, and what do we need to do? And all of us came to the conclusion that it was easier to run out of the 5 wide and get the running back out of the way And also, too, just the big thing was getting teams to declare what they were going to do. Because when you're just in 2-by-2 with a one back or 3-by-1 with a one back, defenses don't have to necessarily define themselves. When you're 3-by-2 or 4-by-1 with no running back, they have to declare themselves. So that was the biggest thing that we learned as we were putting it together back in 2000.
When you look at defenses today, they've certainly progressed in all the different things that they're going to do to spread sets, especially empty sets. I think you start to see a little bit more, variation maybe than you did back then. But the game planning back then, especially because you guys are the only team doing things like this, how difficult was it? Like, was there anything that you felt like, okay, we can rely on this certain set of things, or did you guys just start to see junk defenses from week to week?
We saw junk defenses from week to week. You could tell some coaches had a little bit of an idea, and you had some coaches that had no idea on how to defend it. And at that point, it was cutting edge. And don't get me wrong, I think it's still very, very difficult to prepare for, and that's why we do it. But back then, especially, we were Division IV in Ohio here. Division IV. You're not going to find many Division IV teams that have 5 athletes that can cover 5 good wideouts. So we had such an advantage. 2001, we ended up going 15-0 and winning the state championship. And to be quite honest, there was only one team that pressed us all year long, and that was Coldwater.
Yeah, another great program here in Ohio. And really, that's just a great conference in general, great area. You see a lot of really good small school football from a numbers standpoint, right? You mentioned that, you didn't see a lot of teams who would line up like that, but that became a way for you guys. How do you look at, competing with something like that in a small school where, I don't know, you get what you can get. You don't recruit, right? But
right.
How did it change, I guess, the participation and I guess even the community's outlook on it, right? Because I know you can get some positives and you certainly can get some negatives out of that too if people think if they think you're crazy for what you're doing.
Oh yeah. Well, I get that even today at Medina. But
I know you do.
When I was back in Kenton, we definitely saw our numbers grow. Which, that's the biggest thing is there's safety in numbers, whether it's in football, whether it's in any other sport, the more people you can get participating and trying out and whatnot, the more chance you're going to have to find athletes. And at Kenton, we were fortunate that our numbers, grew from my first year there. I think we were like 63 to about 83. And at a Division IV school here in Ohio, that's a huge jump in 1 year. And, you start to get more guys, especially when you're throwing the ball around. One of the biggest benefits is you get some of those guys that are maybe not necessarily don't want to be those kinds of football players that want to stick their nose in and whatever, but they're willing to run around and play basketball on grass is what you call it. And, even since we've gone to this at Medina in the last few years, we've seen those kinds of kids starting to come out for us again, which is great.
So, the whole idea of basketball on grass, and I believe at that time you guys were playing on grass, right? Kenton didn't have turf field.
I think there's still grass.
Yeah. How did you deal with some of the seasonal stuff we get? We hit mid-October and later, and you guys were playing late into the year a lot. It's not great weather here, and even now, I know we had a couple late season weekends here where it was rainy, it was windy, all those things that can really affect the team who's going to throw the football. How did you guys, I guess, deal with some of that, and whether it was back then or now? I guess being prepared to take on inclement weather with this type of an offense.
Well, the biggest thing is just convincing the kids and the assistant coaches, hey, rain is to our advantage. It's not necessarily always to our advantage, but you do try to convince them that. But back then, there was one particular game actually where we were playing over at Van Wert in 2001, and we ended up winning the game 15-14, and we were very fortunate. But that was a game that it was just torrential downpour, mud, everything else, and we did finally get a couple of pass routes where our guy knew where he was going and the defensive guy fell down, and we were able to connect and make a couple of plays. But you're right, it used to be a lot harder when it was late in the season, get some rainstorms, get some mud games. It's not as hard today. I know here in Medina we haven't played on grass in over 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
So it definitely made a big difference.
So there was that period of your career where you come to Avon Lake, distinctly different style of football than you were used to, and another Hall of Fame head coach who you worked for, and Dave DeLugas, who did an incredible job here in Avon Lake. I got to be on the other side of the ball from you guys a lot, and you guys were definitely going to be somebody who lined up and tried to knock you off the ball, both sides. Very physical, black and blue type of team, different style of offense. You guys would run that Maryland stacked eye, and there's not a wide receiver in the game. What was that adjustment like for you in coming from a place that didn't have fullbacks and tight ends to one that, you really didn't see until maybe a little bit later, some of that spread? I'm sure that was your influence, but didn't see some of the spread elements till much later in your tenure there at Avon Lake.
Well, I had the benefit of coaching in an offense much like Avon Lake's before I went to Kenton. So Kenton was really eye-opening for me, with going 5 wide and even going 3-by-1 and 2-by-2 a lot the first year, and then opening up to the 5 wide. That was the big eye-opener for me. Actually, going to Avon Lake then was going back to kind of stuff I knew, counter, down, running the power game. But coaching with Dave, so much different than coaching with Coach Mock, just for the simple fact that the two styles of offense were so different. And it just shows that there's coaching a lot of the time, you got to be flexible and everything else, and you got to coach to the kind of kids you have. Coach DeLugas at Avon Lake, we had big, powerful, pounding offensive linemen, defensive linemen. Our fullbacks and tailbacks were big. Don't get me wrong, we had some athletes out at wide receivers and stuff like that, but Dave's idea of getting fancy was going on too. And there's nothing wrong with that. But Dave did allow me to bring some ideas, because we were fortunate at that time too, in the early 2000s when I came to Avon Lake in 2002. We had a couple of wide receivers, Andrew Means and Trey Strauss, who ended up going to the Big Ten, that we were able to utilize some of the stuff that we had from Kenton, some of the ideas. Just getting Dave to let us throw a slip screen to Andrew or Trey was huge. And those guys could break games open, and they did for us. And I don't remember if we ever ran one against you, but those guys in the open field getting a slip screen was huge.
I don't remember many of the slip screens. I just remember Trey and Andrew running like deep posts on us, and knowing it's coming and still not being able to take the ball away. I mean, it's two Big Ten receivers who did an incredible job, and it's great. Actually, Andrew is back here in Avon Lake. He's our baseball coach now, and I know from a personal standpoint, we love him there. My son being on the baseball team and what he's doing there. But, when you look at the programs you've been at too, I think set aside whatever kind of offense and defense, you had some really strong culture. That persists today. Mike's no longer at Kenton. Dave's no longer at Avon Lake, but you can still feel the presence of those guys in the cultures that are there. What were some of the biggest things for you in looking at how you develop a culture that you were able to learn from those two great coaches?
Well, the biggest thing, and you know this from coaching, is you have to have an identity. When we were at Avon Lake, we honestly believed that we were 2 touchdowns ahead before we ever got off the bus, because we knew that we were going to pound you and pound you and pound you into submission. When I was at Kenton, basketball on grass, quote unquote, we knew that we were up 2 touchdowns before we got off the bus. And that sounds arrogant, but to me, to be successful and have a successful culture, you need to have that sense of arrogance. And that's what we are developing at Medina. At Medina, you've been around Northeast Ohio. Medina's always had great athletes, but never really been known for football. And that's what we're working hard at changing the culture at Medina and getting us to the point that, why aren't we competing with the Menners? Why aren't we competing with the St. Ed's? Why aren't we competing with the St. Ignatius of the world? I think we made great strides this year.
Well, definitely, there's not many teams in a single season who say they can knock off a St. Ed's and a St. Ignatius, just two incredible programs with Coach Lombardo there at St. Ed's, Coach Kyle at St. Ignatius. It takes quite a bit to be able to do that, and I'd say you guys definitely, put your name on the map as far as we're going to be a football school this year. And as we said, you've done it with a little bit different style than everybody else around the area. Looking at that and what you've done, how do you take that momentum and keep moving that forward?
Well, the kids, the big thing is, like we just talked about, believing in what you're doing, have an identity. Our kids right now have a lot of confidence in what we are doing and have a lot of confidence in the coaching staff. And that's another key that, we haven't really talked about yet. When I was at Avon Lake and when I was at Kenton, is the continuity of a coaching staff. It's huge. That is so underrated, in my opinion. If you look at the really good football programs around the state of Ohio, or even just in Northeast Ohio, let's talk about Avon Lake. Avon Lake for years has had continuity over the years. Even since Coach Kostelnik took over now, they've had continuity. Coach Elder at Avon, continuity, same guys. Our program has started to take a turn because I haven't had to replace a coach now in 2 years. That's huge. Just having the continuity and the kids believing in the coaching staff, the coaches coming together and believing in each other. I know I was at Avon Lake for, I think it was 12 years, and I was still the new guy in year 11. So, the continuity really does matter.
Yeah, definitely. And looking at, I guess, some of the challenges you face right now, when you're a team like a Kenton or a Medina right now, it's a little bit easier for your kids to go out and work on some of the skills that they're going to be doing when August hits, right? To get out and throw the football around, especially now that there's turf. Go back to the Avon Lake days, other than some of the things you did with Trey and Andrew, it's not necessarily you're going to go out and work, power football. Hey guys, let's go work on our power running game. You guys work on being athletes, throwing the ball around. Are there any challenges to that, or what have your kids been able to do during all this shutdown during the summer? I know you could do some things, but it was small groups. How much did they, I guess, take into their own hands getting that done versus, needing to be directed by the coaches?
Well, that's where you see your program grow. When I first got to Medina 4 years ago, we were lacking some senior leadership, to be quite honest, because the team before, or the year before, was so loaded with seniors, and didn't see much growth from the underclassmen at that time. Now, our program over the last 4 years, we have seen kids more and more because we work hard at developing it, and part of that is, we play a lot of kids on Friday nights. We'll play up to 50 kids in a game weekly because we two platoon, offense, defense. We try to get more guys on special teams that are younger and everything else, and then what that leads to has led to good leadership skills for our kids and buy-in from the kids, and so. Through working through this COVID stuff, before the 2020 season, we had a great senior leadership, and then we also had some great junior leadership where kids taking initiative. We have a pretty special quarterback right now, where he would organize and 7-on-7 stuff with the offense and the defense, and we weren't necessarily even involved. The coaches weren't. Where the kids were taking the initiative and getting it done.
When you look at, starting this off season and, coming up here probably early January for you, I know you guys are remote in school right now. This is definitely uncharted waters for coaches. I've been talking to, some high school coaches about this recently on the podcast. What's the approach to, being able to work with some restrictions, whereas last year, a year ago, it was kind of business as usual. You
Right.
get your guys into the weight room. There's none of these worries about social distancing or masks or anything that is at the forefront of our thoughts right now. So you're able to go about building your team like you usually would. Now there's these restrictions in place, especially in getting things kicked off. Have you thought about your approach to how you do this with all the things that you're having to deal with?
Well, we, thank God or thank goodness for Zoom and Google Meets and all that stuff, because we, have group meetings with our coaches and with our positions. But also, too, we can have a huge meeting and talk about what we're sending out. We send out workouts to the different players and different position specific workouts. And for the most part, our kids have been able to buy in. Once this hit last year, in the spring, in April and whatever, we've already started this. So this is for this group of kids coming into this off season. This is already we've been through this, so that's one advantage. The kids are, chomping at the bit to get started. I have told them that we're going to hold off until after the holiday breaks and get started in January. Games aren't won in December. So we're going to start in January. And the biggest thing is, with the kids, them understanding what it takes now to be successful. And they're starting to see the fruits of their labor, a couple of big wins this year in the playoffs and things like that. But for us, we're excited to see the kids, progress not only as football players, but as leaders. And this is all what high school sports is all about. So this really just pushes it even more so, to get these kids to become better people and better leaders.
Coach, I know you're speaking at the New York High School Coaches Association Clinic February 2nd through 4th. You're going to be talking about your empty offense and some of the advantages of it. Could you give us, I guess, a preview of some of the things that coaches might hear if they attend that session?
Well, the biggest thing, I'll talk about advantages as far as why we do what we do. We play in one of the toughest conferences in the state of Ohio, whether it's public or private. And, we don't necessarily always have the biggest linemen and everything else, but we always have athletes. So what we're trying to do is distribute the football to our different athletes and whatnot. But in the talk, I'm going to talk about some of that. I'm going to talk about some concepts that we run, some of the rules that we have for our offense as far as splits, protections. I'll even talk about some of the concepts of what against certain coverages. This is what we like to do, or if we see too high, we're running the football. I mean, that is a no-brainer. And when I say run the football, not necessarily quarterback, we may check to a screen and different things like that. But I'm going to present some screens and present some of our running concepts out of the empty and some of our passing concepts.
I know in watching a lot of football around Northeast Ohio, and I think we see it across the country, it's become pretty popular to see the tight front, the four eyes, odd front in order to stop the run. How much of that do you guys see being, primarily an empty team? Is that something teams still like to do, or are they widening out a little bit with their edge rushers because of the constant threat of pass?
Well, they're widening out, and we force them to widen out. See, that's why part of the reason we do what we do is we want to dictate to the other team what they have to do. Our splits are 2.5 or 3 foot splits. Never any shorter than 2.5 feet. Our quarterback, we line up our quarterback at 7.5 or 8 yards deep. So we are going to force you to widen, and we are going to force you to determine and show what you are going to do. If you're going to blitz us, if you have any chance of getting to us, you have to show us. I mean, there is no delaying, like with your middle linebacker and delay blitz. You can delay all day if you want, because we're going to take advantage of that. The biggest thing for us is that we still want to get the ball out, in 3 seconds or 3.5 seconds. And, with us at 7.5, 8 yards and 3 foot splits, it's hard to get to us.
Yeah, with that snap, that's something that's definitely unique. So I'd imagine it's going to be a little bit different than a traditional shotgun snap in the way you get it back there. What's the technique on that? How is that more of, you're going to spin it back there like a guy maybe short snapping for a field goal, or what kind of technique is he using?
Yeah, it's spun back there a lot like a field goal. I mean, and it's not as difficult as you think it is. I mean, to be honest, when we try to tighten up a little bit for a run game situation, we try to tighten up our quarterback a little bit, it's never pretty. Our kids are just so used to snapping it to 7.5, 8 yards that it's just much easier for us.
Yeah. So with your quarterback run game, that is my next question. From that depth, are there any challenges to getting the ball where you want it to within the box if you're able to get a lighter box to run the football there?
Well, we may tell him if he's going to run the ball, because a lot of the time he checks into the run. If you're going to run the ball, kind of cheat up, but don't make it obvious. All right, so maybe make it to 6.5. And the biggest thing for us as far as that is, if we count, it's all the numbers game, counting the numbers, 3-1, 3-2, a 4-2 box, he has the green light to call what he wants. For us, the biggest run for us this past year and a half has been quarterback trap. We will just we'll block both ends upfield, and he can call whichever guard he wants to trap. We block down, with the other guard and back with the center, or double team the nose, and the other guard wraps around up on the middle backer. I mean, it's actually silly how easy. I mean, it really is. So when people see that and they're like, why are teams doing that for you? Well, the biggest thing is that our splits. We make you show us what you're going to do.
Yeah, I mean, there's not a lot of disguise when you're spreading the whole field like that with everybody. I mean, the more you pack the box in, the easier it is to disguise things. But as you said, you kind of got to declare where you're going to be. So, in looking at coverage wise, the things you typically see, is it still going to be a lot of quarters? Have teams leaned one way or the other to how they're going to play you guys from the back end?
Well, the biggest thing for us that we're starting to see a lot more of is like cover 3 one side, cover 2 the other. we'll still see some quarters, but people are still guessing, and we still don't see a whole lot of film that helps us going into a game. And now we're starting to finally get some film from the previous year, which is nice. As long as the coaching staff's the same, because coaches are creatures of habit. They're going to do what they like and do what they do. And so now we're starting to build a little library of, okay, well, this is what Menor does. This is what Euclid does. This is what Solon does against us. Actually, one of the teams that I think defends us, one of the teams that defends us the best is Solon. Their kids are just so well coached. Coach McQuaid over there and his coaching staff has done such a great job, and they do a very good job of giving us a couple of different looks. They're one of the teams that will give us cover 3 one side, cover 2 the other, or give us quarters, and dare us to do some stuff too.
When I look at the game planning aspect of how you approach things, and heard a really good clinic talk from Andy Kotelnicki at Buffalo, talking about the different approaches, to focus on yourself or to focus all on the opponent, etc. And I think I've been in both places on that continuum, but with something like this, especially early on, as you said, not necessarily having a lot of film, have you found yourself just really focusing more on here's what we need to do to get better, and really putting that focus internally than worrying so much about what somebody else might do?
Yeah, we don't worry about, for the most part, we don't worry about what the other team is going to do. We worry about us and what we need to do to get better every week. But for us, what we teach our kids is that it doesn't really matter what they're doing, because our rules are our rules. Because are you familiar with the R4 system for the most part?
Yeah, definitely. I used it before, learned it directly from Dub and Darren Slack back when they first put that thing out. Yeah.
Right. Well, we are a pure R4 team. So it doesn't really matter what the other team is running, because it's all a numbers game. So for me, following that halo and teaching the kids the halo, including the receivers, and then just as long as we are consistent. Now, they're high school kids. They're not going to follow the rules 100% of the time. As long as we are consistent and try to follow the R4 rules, for those of you guys listening, it's rhythm, read, rush, run. All right, that's the rules. And we could do a whole another hour on just the R4.
For sure.
But for us, the R4 has been a savior. I mean, especially in our league, because the coaches in our league are so good. And now we have, it gives you common language, a common vernacular to talk to your receivers and your quarterbacks. It gives you common rules, and immediately, we're watching while the defense is out on the field, if we're watching film on the sideline, I can say to the quarterback, hey, did you count the guys? And why are you going over there? Where should you be going? And explain it to me. And he can do it, and we have a common language. So that's been huge.
For sure. Now, have you guys progressed to using Dub's R4 game planning system?
I have looked at it, but for me, the reason I have not done that is we're not really a running football team. All right, so I don't think that we need it. As we dabble more into the run game again, like during the playoffs, I don't know if people realized when we played St. Ed's, I think we threw the ball 27 times and ran the ball 24 times. But to me, that's just, an adjustment that we had to make to win that particular football game. We still stayed true to who we were as a football program, but it's kind of different when you run out the stack I with 2 linebackers and a defensive tackle.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Well, from that side, you mentioned, it's getting into some run game stuff. So you're borrowing guys from the other side because you don't necessarily have those fullback tight end types within the offense. How does that for you, I guess, create a little bit more of that buy-in, excitement around the offense. I know, even when I was at BW, and the rosters we would have there, we'd recruit your school, but I found myself borrowing guys from the defense, and that it was just good overall for our team's culture, right? Being two platoon,
absolutely,
you got to fight that battle sometimes of, us versus them, and remember we're all on the same side. And I always found like being able to borrow those guys in certain packages really brought things together. Have you found that to be true?
Absolutely. I think it's important, and not only, I'm the head coach, but I coach the quarterbacks. I call the offense. I don't get to see the defensive guys very often. So the way we do it, and you're not going to believe this because it makes our coaching staff just laugh their butts off. I steal time is what I call it. So practice starts at 3:30. We're out there at 3:10, and I take all of the defensive guys that I'm going to steal time with. So like linebackers and running back types and tight end types. And I bring them over, bring those starting offensive line over, bring a couple of receivers if they're in the packages that we're going to run and whatever. And we go against air for 3 days during the week. Like on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, we go against air. We never line up and run an offensive running play against the defense. Because the rules are the rules.
Right.
When I was at Avon Lake and we were running counter, down is down. It doesn't matter if there's somebody there. You block down, you stay on your rail, and somebody will show. So, but our defensive coordinator, he just laughs his butt off. He's like, "How do you run the ball and never practice against anybody?" And I'm like, "It's just the rules. It's no different than our spread stuff. Follow the rules, and it'll be fine." So when we run power, or we run counter, or we run our sweep, which is a reach, just follow the rules, and somebody will show.
Coach, it's been a lot of fun being able to watch what you guys did this past season. Now, for me, it was always just tuning into Friday night touchdown and watching some of the highlights and watching the scores, because I was watching my son play out here in Avon Lake. But not a surprise to me that you guys have turned the corner. I knew in implementing this system you had a little bit of a rough road early on, but you've been persistent with it. You believed in it, and have really, I think, gotten your team to buy into this. So it's exciting to see where you've taken these guys. But with all those things we've talked about, and you've mentioned a lot of great things here in this short podcast, but what's the one thing you do, Coach, that you feel really gives your team the winning edge?
Gives our team the winning edge. But having an identity. I see a lot of teams, and I've been doing this for a long time, and the teams that really struggle at times are where, as you prepare to play them and you're watching them on film, you're trying to figure out what the heck they're trying to do. So if you're a young coach listening and you like to listen to podcasts, I love to listen to podcasts, and I listen to yours all the time, Coach. I firmly believe that as a young coach coming up, and I learned this from Coach Schmock and I learned it from Coach DeLugas, is make sure your team has an identity.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. And that's something, you've been at places where they've done it, and I think you've established that identity now at Medina. So it's going to be fun to watch what you guys do in the coming years. Coach, I really appreciate you taking the time. I know we run into each other all the time, so it's exciting to be able to get you on the podcast finally here. And, for our listeners out there who might want to connect and learn more, what's the best way to do that?
You can email me or call. My email is lairdl@medinabees.org.
Awesome.
And if they want to connect more through the telephone, afterwards, I'll give them my telephone number.
Awesome. Well, Coach, best of luck to you and the Bees here in 2021, and I'm sure I'll see you around the neighborhood here in Avon Lake.
Hey, thank you very much, Coach, for having me, and congratulations to your son on Tiffin University. That's wonderful.
Thank you. Appreciate that, Larry. Take care. Thank you again for listening to the Coach and Coordinator Podcast. Please, if you are enjoying the podcast, head over to iTunes or Spotify and click 5-star for rate. If you have a minute, write a review. It really helps the podcast. Check out our new home for the Coach and Coordinator Podcast. That's at coachandcoordinator.com. And follow me on Twitter at Coach K. Grabowski.